everyone. Guillaume Letuel here, host of the E-commerce Wizards podcast, where I feature leaders in business and e-commerce. Today's guest is Derric Haynie, CEO of e-commerce-tech.io, which is a technological recommendation platform for e-commerce merchants looking for the right tool to grow their store. Today, we will be talking Magento versus Shopify, the big debate here. So I think that's going to be fun. Derric, our guest, is a Shopify expert. His whole technological recommendation platform stuff is around Shopify tools and which tools should Shopify merchants need depending on which kind of problems they have, checkout, growth, whatever. That's it. And as your host, I'm a Magento expert. So we're going to have some fun. Before we get started, our sponsorship message. This episode is brought to you by Mage Montreal. If a business wants a powerful e-commerce online store that will increase their sales, or to move piled up dormant inventory to free up cash reserves, or to automate business processes to gain efficiency and reduce human processing errors, our company, Mage Montreal, can do that. We've been helping e-commerce stores for over a decade. Here's a catch. We're specialized and only work on the Adobe Magento platform. We're among a handful of certified Adobe Magento companies in Canada. We do everything Magento related. If you know someone who needs design, development, maintenance, training, we got their back. Email our support team, support@magemontreal.com, or go to magemontreal.com. That's MAGE Montreal.com. And now, before again we start, a shout out to Robert Wren of JetRail, who connected us because, otherwise this episode would not exist. So thanks, Robert. And now let's get to it. Thank you for being here, Derric.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to learning more about Magento because it is a platform that I honestly need to know more about, but I've neglected for a while.
Oh, that's an interesting way of starting. So say, hey, he's gonna charge. Like, how's that gonna be? So same thing. I'm pretty sure I'll learn a few things about Shopify. I did my research obviously before our podcast meeting today. As the guest, I guess I'll let you have the opening salvo.
Well, I guess, all right, Shopify versus Magento. I find, Shopify as a platform is just, it's in some ways you could call it a down market solution, but it's actually it scales well with the business and frees up a lot of costs, for instance, in DevOps or in managing your own servers. And it frees up some costs in development in a lot of ways because there are so many different things that you can plug into the tool that become accessible by the marketing team, accessible by the CEO who doesn't know how to code, and it gives a little bit more of that freedom and flexibility, I would argue, to make it so that you don't have to always send it to the dev team.
Okay, that's a nice one to start with. So, and I'll spin my answer. I'll stage a bit my answer before I give it. So, I do believe in a general way that Shopify is a great product. And if it was not already on the market, somebody would come up and invent Shopify, and there are very few projects where actually it is the right pick to either do it on Shopify or do it on Magento. It's a narrow overlap of a zone here. Very often there's a clear platform that is the best choice for that specific project. Should you build it on Shopify? Should you build it on Magento? And I've personally lived both. I've been doing this for almost 15 years now. And, since Magento version 1, whatever, that was 10 years ago or so. And I've seen projects right now we are doing some project that we're migrating people away from Shopify or Shopify Plus, and we're rebuilding on Magento Commerce. And I've seen the other way around as well, to be fair, that some merchant left Magento and went with Shopify. So I think I have a pretty fair perspective to some degree on this. So if we're talking about the total cost of ownership, there's a few different nuance to discuss. But in a general way, the cost of ownership is lower on Shopify. Shopify just wins in the cost category, but that win comes also at a cost, a different kind of cost.
Yeah.
What are you giving up so that it doesn't cost as much? And that's where a lot of this battle comes in, because the two platforms are fundamentally different. It's a different mindset, it's a different philosophy behind it. So on Shopify, you have a SaaS, a software as a service platform, which means you have a black box there that's maintained by the Shopify team. And because it's maintained like this by that big corporation, they decide how the user experience will be. And there are very severe limitations as to what can or cannot be changed as per what they decide should be changed and so on. So if you want to have a very customized workflow, very customized experience, there are things that Shopify would just not allow you to do. It's not even a question of budget. And yes, there are lots of plugins or extensions, if you wish, on the App Store that you can add to Shopify, but even that has its limitations. So without going too technical, just a little bit here, if a software does not offer what's called an API endpoint, here, if Shopify does not allow you to modify that specific functionality that you want to modify, it is just forbidden. It's not a question of money. You just can't, period. So even though there are apps that add additional functionality, if there are some apps that you would not be able to create on Shopify because Shopify does not provide an endpoint to connect to modify the functionality that you desire to modify. So that's one of the key things that you're giving away to have that lower cost. They say, here's the box, here's the sandbox in which you're going to play, and this is the safe zone. Go do whatever you want to do in that sandbox. And if that's great for you, well, awesome. You got a very good product with the Shopify at a lower cost, but it has a limited range of sales scenario or customer experience that it can support or offer. So we can go. I could go for a long time, but I don't want to hijack the microphone for too long here. I'll pass it back to you.
I'll play your side here, and I'll talk more about these limitations in detail because they are quite a pain in the butt. The first one is got to be the checkout functionality. Checkout on Shopify is owned by Shopify, and you cannot modify the checkout at all if you are a Shopify tiered merchant. If you are a Shopify Plus merchant, there are many changes you can make to the checkout process, but it still has certain limitations in functionality. So just as an example, there's a great tool called Order Bump that you can put on that checkout page, and you can just one click add a product to the cart right there at checkout. Great idea, makes merchants a lot of money. You cannot do this on a Shopify regular plan. You can only do this on a Shopify Plus plan, and it's still limited in design and functionality based on certain rules and limitations that Shopify puts forward. That's one. I would say that is one of the major limitations. The other, and you mentioned user experience. There's a lot you can do with user experience. You can change the entire layout and design of any page on the site, except for that checkout. But what you can't do is you cannot improve some of the fundamentals of your page speed load time. So I have seen in the past, there's a company called DFO Global, who they had had a website on Shopify. They decided they're a large successful company now. And they said, we think we can build a faster loading landing page than Shopify. And so they got page speed load time down from maybe on Shopify, it could average 3 to 5 seconds, which is a little high because you're usually on a shared server of theirs. That's the black box you're talking about. You don't own the server, so you cannot fundamentally get a better page speed load time. They got their page speed load time down to under a second by using their own server and a very slimmed down page design and building it all from scratch, which is very expensive. I think they invented their own platform at the end of the day, and now they actually sell it to merchants and use it in their own business. It's not
Shopify anymore.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's a completely different platform than both. But they migrated completely off. So those are some of the limitations. And a third one that comes to mind, and usually there are things you can do for page speed load time that help, but it'll never get it into this like sub-second range because you don't own the server, and that kind of limits you. The third thing is a big kind of, it's not a scandal, but a big problem that arose in the last few months here was the Shopify subscription billing API. So for a while, Shopify didn't offer anything as far as a subscription payment directly. They had an integration with Recharge and a few other tools that allowed you to use them as a subscription backbone, and then they would actually hijack the checkout experience, and you would check out on rechargepayments.com essentially. My subdomain.rechargepayments.com. Now Shopify created the subscription billing API, but in my opinion, they did a bad job rolling it out. It actually caused companies like Recharge, I think there's another one called ChargeBee, they had to shut down getting new customers while they migrated from their own platform to the Shopify billing API. And there were a lot of API functionality that they needed that didn't exist. So they rolled this API out too early. And in a lot of ways, a lot of merchants and subscription brands on Shopify were hurt in the process. It was not better. Now, I think the goal and where they are now is a better process. But for a few months, like you said, that black box, you had to deal with this problem because you're on Shopify as opposed to Magento. So those are some of the costs that I see on the Shopify side that we experienced recently. So I'm not really winning this game, am I?
Well, I don't think it's about winning. I prefer actually a search for the truth, quite frankly. And
Yes.
you can notice I'm not very adversarial about it. More like trying to find what's true here. And because it goes beyond just Shopify and Magento, what you're talking about here, it goes to a SaaS solution, software as a service, versus an environment that is fully open, that you own the server and that you control it. Of course, you don't want a server in your closet. Go to a proper hosting company specialized in this. But it's a more fundamental trade-off than Shopify versus Magento. This specific point. So with any SaaS software, you say, well, if the experience is fine, the number of features that I have for my subscription system, I'm fine with it. Then great, lower cost. You delegate all the trouble of maintaining the server, maintaining the IT infrastructure and all that to the companies, Shopify, and you don't burden yourself with that. You focus on, let's say, you're building your business, which is awesome. But you pointed so well here, the limitation of this is that you don't control the customer's experience in the business. And you're saying like there are limitations, they're lacking. Yeah, you don't. They're missing functionalities from that switch of which was the subscription system, the external system, or Shopify's system. So when you're on a platform that is open, such as Magento, then you have full control of the experience, and you own the control. It's your own system, infrastructure, and server, and all that. So that's the positive. What's the negative of owning that full thing? As well, the full burden's on you. So you cannot rely on a big corporation like Shopify to provide all that infrastructure for you, that IT, those expertise, and so on. So it's why Magento tends to position itself. Actually, when it was created, it was for the mid-market industry. Now, how do you define mid-market? There's a lot of definition, and it changed per country and per tax return file and whatnot. But I say it's over $25 million per year, or over 250 employees kind of range. You tend to be in the mid-market, businesses there. And
what are some other pros where you think Magento does better? Is it higher SKU count?
Yeah. For higher SKU count, Magento can win on this one on the commerce version of it by using database sharding. So basically, you can just explode your database and have as big of a catalog as you could possibly want. There are risks and downsides and limitation as well. So that's the flashy side of it, as big as you want. Wow. But in reality, you have to remember that all those products will need to be indexed. So there could be a limitation on practically speaking, how you handle that, even though the theoretical model says, as big as you want to. Maybe at a few million products, you'll have limitations. So that's with database sharding. If you're talking some other specific areas that I believe Magento is way stronger, is especially around everything that's multi-site, multi-brand, multi-language, multi-currency, multi-warehouse, multi-store. Yeah. Because Shopify will claim we support multi-site, multi-brand, multi-language, but you have a clone in Shopify of this, and it all lives in individual silo like that. So it's not a true multi-everything like Magento has, because on Magento you just have one instance, and you have all this branching out from it like a tree. So you can even share catalogs across your multiple brands. So you can have one brand that's selling at whatever store, another brand that's selling at another store, another logo and all that, but they share catalog, or you can share catalog data, or you choose how you manage that. So, or you can decide to say, I want to dominate Google or something like that. And then you're going to have your single catalog with different domain names and logos, that will come up on Google for the search results. And then you try to dominate Google this way. And they buy from, the first and third and second results are all you with different looks, And you could even have a slightly different price if you wanted. You could adjust the catalog a little bit there. So the true power of Magento, it often comes down to that. That's a fundamental infrastructure thing that Shopify could hardly replicate without some major headaches in the architecture of everything. Because Magento is made this way, that you have sort of that tree structure, that you start from an installation and you branch out multi-store, multi-warehouse, multi-country, multi-currency, multi-language.
I was about to ask about country and currency, because in Shopify, often it's one storefront with a currency switcher. Do you, in Magento, often find you're creating separate domains and separate storefronts for separate regions?
Yes, but that's more like just a decision thing. It's like you choose how you build it. You will typically all have it anyway on one installation of Magento. So let's say when you do your version update, you only do one version update on one instance of the installation, and then every site gets it. Of course, each site still needs to have its own quality control because there's more manual control of everything in Magento. But if you want to do a subdomain US dot or Canada dot or dot US or dot or slash US slash Canada, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like you choose how you structure that thing after that.
Let's talk about this version update, because this comes in as a con, I would say.
Yeah.
The site goes down for this.
Actually, that depends how you do it. You could have it down to a few seconds, actually, and really, literally a few seconds.
Few seconds, thousands of dollars. Okay.
Depends on which store. Most store won't have a problem. You could wonder, like, did my Wi-Fi cut for 5 seconds or something?
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about uptime. Do you think, I mean, who has a higher uptime percentage? Certainly, I've seen outages in Shopify. I've also seen outages in the Shopify. I've heard people can't log into their own backend in Shopify. Partner logins are down, a few other things like that. Their front end has had a couple of rolling blackouts, the kind of things. But what do you think? Who's got the best uptime?
Well, the uptime is decentralized here because Shopify is centralized, but then every Magento merchant is hosted wherever they're hosted. So you have a decentralization in that discussion for uptime. So it comes down a lot to who's your hosting partner. On Magento Commerce, you have two choices. You can buy Magento Commerce Cloud, which is now called Adobe Commerce. They just renamed that last week. Then Adobe is your hosting provider in that case. Alternately, you can buy Adobe Commerce on-premise. For on-premise just means not hosted by Adobe. Doesn't mean you put it in your closet. And then you could go see any hosting partner that you want, like Nexus, JetRails, WebScale, and others. So then it depends on the performance of that specific hosting company for like the uptime and reliability of this.
There is one other factor that came into play when I worked at a beauty box subscription, which was on Magento too, and had a large tech team and DevOps person and all this stuff, as well as an outsourced agency. And it was that it was the kind of store that like really peaked with traffic. Like an influencer would post on Instagram, and we'd get I had a screenshot of like 45,000 concurrent visitors to the site. Now the site was down because at somewhere about 10,000, concurrent visitors, the server couldn't handle the volume. It became a serious issue. I mean, technically it was a very successful day, but it was also a very frustrating day. A lot of customer service complaints on social media and stuff like that. So is there this additional risk for uptime there?
Well, I believe that is very similar on both platforms, because what you just mentioned here, like 10,000 concurrent visitors at the same time would be sort of the limit roughly on that Shopify plan, which is a limit that they decide to put there. Is that applicable for Shopify Plus
Shopify
as well?
Doesn't limit the number of visitors, but it could be true. So I know, for example, Kylie Cosmetics, they had a special scalable infrastructure plan for her store so that when she posted to Instagram, they could support the volume going to her store. They had to hash that out with her personally because she's a very large personal brand. And it was very, the swings in volume there. Now, if you're a small merchant and you've been getting 500 hits a day or 1,000 hits a day, and all of a sudden you get 40,000, that could cause you to crash. But what's interesting is that your instance isn't just on one Shopify server. It's kind of across the entire Shopify network. So in most cases, you should be able to scale relatively infinitely. If not, if you're at a large size, then you're a Shopify Plus merchant and you're talking with your rep and you're saying, hey, we need to make sure that our infrastructure can scale infinitely for as many new visitors that hit the site. And another thing to note on that was when I was in the Beauty Box subscription, and maybe this isn't a problem today, they told me that I wanted to use a CDN network so that the pages would load instantly. They said that there had to be a small amount of software that was run on the server for every time the page loaded on the homepage. And that was kind of what was causing the crash. Whereas most of the time for if every page but the checkout, I believe, maybe the cart page for Shopify, it can load through a CDN. I mean, Magento should be CDN.
No, Magento is for CDN as well, especially commerce comes with Fastly. Otherwise, you choose what you put it on. You want to put Fastly, you want to put Cloudflare or whatever. So yeah, it's fully CDN as well.
It was just the way that my team decided to do it, which is a risk. And now if you've got Mage Montreal or a guru to prevent you from doing something silly with your site or your backend, then you probably won't run into too much of a problem. But if you build a site in which loading the homepage requires software to load on a site, then you have a fundamental limitation in server bandwidth and can no longer go through a CDN for some reason.
Yeah. But now we're talking about sort of hard limits from either architecture, from server side and stuff like that. So like even Shopify will have some, unless they decide that, there's no problem. So, I've heard of some limitation, but they're quite high. I've heard on Shopify Plus, 10,000 checkout per minute. I mean, if you have 10,000 checkout per minute, I mean,
you're the most successful merchant. It's your Amazon.
You're pretty successful. Yeah, it's not really a problem, but I've heard of some limitations like that. And of course, on the non-plus plan, there's some kind of limitation somewhere, but it's a black box, hard to know, which is typically not a problem. So on Shopify, you can typically just do a flash sale and not worry that's going to work fine. On Magento, when you do a flash sale, well, check with your hosting company first because they're providing your infrastructure. So flash sale is something that we always plan. And we look at it how big of a flash sale we're talking. Most of the time, it's not a problem. It's just you have a server that's big enough to support it. And even a merchant, I have in mind, without saying names, $15 million per year of online sales, specifically just online, is still running on a single server. So we're not even yet at a clustered approach of having multiple servers separating the database from the web server and running that bigger infrastructure of multiple nodes and so on. So, even doing flash sales on a site that's 15 million per year of sales, you can still handle that on just one server, just buy it big enough that it can take the peaks from flash sales. And if the merchant's really that big, then they just get into that clustered approach of having more than one web server, and then they can scale and plan how much they're going to spend on those flash sales and weekend sales and so on.
This brings us to this point of technical expertise inside an organization. Because I think if you have a low technical understanding of servers, bandwidth, and you don't have a CTO as an e-commerce store owner, which a lot of early and mid-stage stores don't have anybody dedicated specifically to the technology, then it can be really scary to go with a Magento build. You will be fully reliant on your partner who's you're either a development agency or some sort of technical partnership. And if that relationship doesn't work out, you have to find another one immediately, or you can't make any changes to the website, and you have no idea how your server uptime is going to be responded, and all of those things. So I feel like Magento leads itself, of course, towards larger providers, multi-store. I totally agree with multi-warehouse. Totally agree with. Now, Shopify does have those solutions. I don't think they do it quite as well. That's the important thing to say, especially. I think of a company like Men's Warehouse, stores all retail locations, and dozens of warehouses in its own custom supply chain. And I don't even know what platform they're on, but I have to imagine it's that they're not going to be a good fit for Shopify. But I think about a company like Timbuk2, which is, I think, doing $100 million a year, but started more direct to consumer e-commerce, then launched a couple of stores. I think they have New York, San Francisco, something like that. And are branching out that way. And you are seeing them continue to be able to scale through the Shopify platform with very few limitations that I'm for that growth. So there is So back to the original point of technical know-how in the company should be a concern when making the decision at a certain point. Once you're at 100 million in revenue, you can hire in-house for that technical role. Right. But at 3 million years in revenue, can you really bring in a CTO, full time to manage that?
I've seen part-time CTOs either coming directly from us, providing that role as the agency, or other consultant brought on part-time, a bit like your accountant or your lawyer. You don't need to hire a full-time lawyer unless you're really big, or a full-time accountant. They just do that portion of the books and of closing the months or whatever, and closing the year and this return and that. So you don't need someone full-time to bring that technical expertise or independent verification that are we headed in the right direction, technically speaking. So that's for like the high level strategic point of view, like a CTO. Hands-on, you do need more technical capability to run a Magento store, and it's part of why it's not made for small businesses. Like you do have to expect to spend several thousands of dollars per year on that Magento store, because you need either the extra power or you need that extra flexibility, or you say, I don't want to be like all of my competitors who, yes, they can design the visual of the user experience, but they cannot go any further than that. Ultimately, we're all going to have the same experience, more or less, on Shopify with, difference. Okay, did I buy app 1 or app 2 or app 3 to customize that feature? But it's going to be roughly the same experience for the checkout process and for the purchasing process and all that. So you go to Magento because you want that extra power for personalization, or you must go there because of the complexity, for example, of the catalog, complexity of the multi-brands and so on that we were talking about, multi-warehouse. So that's true. And you need to think also about the future. But go ahead. You had something.
Yeah, growing into it as well. So yeah, even if you are at the $10 million revenue mark, but the growth of the business is going to involve all those complexities just listed, you can kind of build in advance on the Magento platform. But if you know that it's going to stay relatively, let's call it streamlined or simplified, then you have a tough decision, or you can be more confident on Shopify. The next spot I thought we would take it is actually payment processing, because you were talking about, or you made me remember, like Shop Pay, having the same checkout experience isn't always a bad thing. It can be a good thing. With Shop Pay, the user once they buy from one Shopify store, their information is stored, similar to Apple Pay or any other kind of payment process like this. And then if you go check out on a different Shopify store, you can actually check out without having to put in your payment information. So it significantly increases conversion rate and makes a sort of network effect, which means as Shopify grows, it's going to be easier and easier to sell on Shopify with Shop Pay. Now, the downside is, of course, Shop Pay is just one way you can pay. You can also use a buy now, pay later tool. You can use PayPal. You can use a few other ways. So it's not, and those are all options available on the Shopify platform. So you're not limited, but that, the limitation is only when paying through Shop Pay itself, which is the primary payment processor from probably all Shopify stores.
Yeah, so you can use whatever payment processor you want on Magento, assuming they have a Magento extension, which most banks do. So yes, the most popular one tend to be, like in Canada, is mostly Moneris. And we've seen a lot of Stripe and PayPal as well. And then people who want Apple Pay will use typically Stripe or Braintree from PayPal to allow Apple Pay, because Apple Pay don't want to position themselves as a competitor to those platforms. It's just like an add-on. So that's their approach for it, at least for now. There's Authorize.net, and there's a lot of US banks that you can just ask the bank, and if they have it, it's often on their website, and then you can use those lower rates that you've negotiated with your bank to benefit of those lower credit card processing rates as well on your website. So that's an interesting
Those rates
benefit.
only exist if you have negotiation power.
Exactly. So it's for the bigger merchant again. So you see, it's not for the same targeted audience.
You know what the rates typically are? I'll really quick. I'll give you. So Shopify regular is 2.9%. I believe it's also plus 30 cents. And then Shopify Plus is 2.4% plus 30 cents transaction rates. And those are the only options you get. And of course, like I said, there can be other payment options still at checkout, but those primarily people pay through that.
Okay, well, that sounds like the same as PayPal, basically, 2.9% plus 30 cents. So it's this is the universal rate for everybody. But but even Stripe, if you contact Stripe, then they will negotiate rates that are not listed on the website. So it's always about the negotiation power of your brand. Say, hey, I'm going to bring you over 10 million a year in processing power, but I think your rate kind of sucks. Can you lower it a few points? And very often they show flexibility there. So that it's always a question of negotiation directly between the merchant and the payment processor, and don't take the listed rates. Do negotiate. Some merchants are easier. Some payment provider are easier to know how much it's going to cost you if they give you like a flat rate, but just like lower than this, like around the 2% ish. Or if you have the let's say a company like Moneris in Canada, it's a bit more difficult to know because every single credit card, like if it's an Amex Platinum or if it's a Golden Visa, whatever, or it's going to change the rate. So it's like you just average it at the end of the month because you have no clue how much your rate processing will be. But in the end, it's lower. But you just no way to know how much will be. So that's with Moneris specifically. So it goes case by case with the payment gateway providers. Yeah.
One downside of Magento is that you have to go find your own payment provider. And with Shopify, you've got out of the box.
It's true. You will have to create yourself a merchant account, either with PayPal, with Stripe, with Authorize.net, Moneris, or others. That's the case. But it's creating an account. But often, if you come from the brick and mortar store and established company, they tend to already have a payment processor for their stores if they're a retail company. And then they can often use the same payment provider as their retail brick and mortar store online, but not always. Sometimes they have like stuff that we've never heard about, and then of course we just bring them to one of the big online player for payment processing. And that reminds me also, just like we skipped to this point quickly, but again about the point of like planning for the future to sort of try to avoid replatforming. It depends a lot on this. Are you able to keep your business simple? Because some business can stay fairly simple in their catalog and so on and scale to 100 million, but not all of them. And some of their businesses can be small, but they have complex needs. Like it wasn't too long that, let's say, they have one warehouse in the States, one warehouse in Canada, or one warehouse in Mexico, or whatever. And then, they're a small company, just a few employees, but they already have to manage their business like a multinational because they have warehouse across the borders. And it becomes multilingual, multi-currency, multi-warehouse pretty quickly, and multi-problem, and then you have that complexity coming in. So I have, let's say, a Shopify merchant like this. They started with nothing, did great, went to about 5 million a year of online sales on Shopify, and now they're replatforming on Magento Commerce Cloud. And because of all those extra capability that they're looking for, and also to add B2B. So it was strictly a B2C experience. Now they want to add B2B. So Magento Commerce has a B2B module also. And unlike, let's say, some other platform, which is out of scope of this discussion, like let's say Salesforce or whatever, that you would be stuck with two platforms with Salesforce. There's one B2B platform and one B2C platform, and you sort of double your upkeep cost, and you have to reteam your website again to design on the second one with Salesforce because Salesforce bought one B2B platform and bought one B2C platform. So it's not the same. So you want to offer B2B, it's a different experience, different platform. But we have a bit of that kind of case with Shopify, which B2B is sort of non-existent out of the box.
So there's a couple of good apps that provide the wholesale side of the business. You can create either a subdomain or subfolder, which allows for logins and different rates and pricing by vendor. So there is a way to do that, but it is a Shopify app. The prices on that app are not bad at all, but it is a little bit fundamentally different. And I've heard issues with how this might integrate with inventory management and a few other kind of hiccups that it causes. So I would say that it's probably not as seamless as Magento doing both, but it is absolutely doable to sell wholesale or B2B. Which is typically, to have kind of that different pricing for specific users that are like managed accounts as opposed to, just a mass market.
Right. So through those apps and their capability or limitation.
Yeah. And that app's just, it's integrating fully with Shopify and plugs into your existing catalog. And it's just changing that front end user experience, I would say, is what it's doing. Right. So you can hit that wholesaler login button. And then it takes you to a login page, into your credentials. And then all of a sudden you are looking at different collections and different product detail pages that, start at 100 units or whatever, and then show you the discounted pricing for you specifically up to that 1,000 units that you want to buy, because that's typically the two things that are changing when we talk about the B2B or wholesale side is that the unit volume is significantly higher. And then there might be some form of tiered discounting or products unique to certain vendors. So only they get to see these products or something like that. So that all can be managed on Shopify. It is just through an app as opposed to, let's say, native. And I honestly don't see Shopify changing that anytime soon because they are so focused on their B2C platform.
So you get sort of the B2B through, not even an afterthought, actually purely through partners. So that the app itself does not cover B2B. It's whatever the app marketplace covers there. For B2B.
The good news is those apps are only doing one thing. And so they are moving fast in improving their features and functionality. They integrate with a lot. They know that they need to like integrate with everything. And so you're seeing maturity in this market now in a way that didn't exist a few years ago. There might not have even been a wholesale app or any legitimate. There was a real cheapo one, I think, a few years ago. But now they've got well-funded venture-backed startups that are building off of the Shopify platform, and that's that's maybe where we could take it next is how in Shopify I feel like it is enabling the technology to build onto its platform in a way that is bringing rise to really unique businesses. Of course, Klaviyo now is everywhere, but started on Shopify and grew there. There's another one called Privy, and there's a few other Shogun, and that really because of lacking functionality in Shopify, purposefully lacking functionality in Shopify, there was room to build these apps, and then the apps themselves started making quite a lot of money. So Shopify did a great job empowering their partner ecosystem, and that's created a really unique space. I would say, and I don't know anything about the Magento extension and app ecosystem. So I know that there are a lot of apps that cross over between the two, but I don't know how Magento might empower their technology partners or anything like that.
That's different. So what's interesting about Shopify, which you just mentioned, like let's say venture-backed creation of a fairly large company that just like address a need like Klaviyo, and we like Klaviyo. They're working with Magento as well now. They have the Magento plugin and all that. So that's interesting, the creation of those larger companies. On Magento, since we address customization as the key focus when you present Magento, it's like, well, sky's the limit or budget's the limit. What do you want to achieve here? And we do just like everything. So, and every business is so different. And because we're going naturally with the complex cases to solve, even with all the bells and whistles that comes with Magento, there's never enough bells and whistles, So those companies still make us develop a lot of custom work, and there are large, there's a very large marketplace. So I don't have the exact numbers, but I know for a fact that the Magento marketplace is like dwarfed by a large factor the Shopify marketplace. Like how many apps are available on Magento? Like just the core.
That's because of the customization, and in some ways, it's better to just custom code sometimes than to pay a monthly subscription for something. For instance, like I might have mentioned one like Shogun. It's a landing page builder design, drag and drop functionality, so it makes it WYSIWYG and easy to use. Now, the pro of that is that the idiot marketer can now do the can change the page around without having to bother the tech team. But the con of it is, of course, paying that subscription fee. So if you've got a development team that can execute on changes needed for product detail pages, then you probably don't need a landing page builder. And so you'll never have to build one. There won't be an app or extension for that because it should just be done in a custom way. There's a few others too that how you change your navigation menu in Shopify is often with an app instead of with custom coding. And a few others. There's this whole low end of the Shopify app market, which I consider tools that two guys in a garage developed and do like one small thing. It adds a bundle, it adds a discount, it adds a little widget here, little drop down there. And it's like, those are all the things that you would always custom code in Magento, which I think is a very big pro to Magento. I'd rather have them custom coded. But at the same time, if it's going to cost me $600 to custom code it, or I could pay $5 a month, it will take many years to get to $600, at $5 a month. So that is the trade-off in that in Magento, I think you pay upfront for development, whereas in Shopify, you get sucked into a tool that solves that problem that you pay for in perpetuity.
Yeah, so the subscription model, short term can be sometimes interesting, and long term becomes different. So the apps in Magento, almost all of them, like 99%, are one-time purchase. So, but it's not expensive. Like typically it's like $99, $200, $300. And if it's the enterprise version instead of the open source version, typically add more or less $300 on it. So the $300 purchase becomes $600 and so on.
I see.
And it's a one-time fee and that's it. So it's more like part of the upfront development cost. And then for the version update of those plugins, it varies per vendor. A lot of the very large vendor like Amnesty will give you lifetime free updates. Some other will give you only updates for a year. But the majority tend to give free update lifetime, not all of them.
So as a merchant listening to this, you're thinking, I'd rather just pay once, pay it up front. But there's actually this hidden cost just in how kind of business economics works. It's why Microsoft used to sell, Microsoft Excel. Now they sell an annual subscription to their products, is because by having a recurring payment SaaS model, it provides in a weird way the capital to that technology company in order for it to invest in growth and scalability. So in some of these one-off tools, there doesn't need to be too much more developed except for some updates, but they're only always going to solve these one things. Whereas if you think of a platform, I'm thinking of the customer service solution Gorgias, which is now also on Magento. But they are charging, month. They launched specifically on the Shopify app ecosystem, and they launched with a relatively low feature set, knowing that they would have to continue to build features over time to reach, this beautiful end goal of their vision. And so I think that you have a lot of certain technologies, and these could be technologies that you add on that aren't Magento extensions. They're just apps, right? They're just other tools like, Slack and Asana are not necessarily part of your e-commerce technology stack, but you still use them in your business. But like there's a value to paying monthly for something and seeing that feature set grow over time, as opposed to a one-time fee for a very specific fix. I'll leave it at that. It's still it's a product by product.
It's a fair point of view. So I'm not going to argue that specific point, like one-time fee versus recurring, but the recurring sometimes can have improvements with it versus depends if you will get improvements. Some makers of plugins will give you improvements, but often it's just like you said, new version fixes, but sometimes there are improvements and it's case by case. But I think the main differentiator is not exactly that, even though it's one of it. It's more like if you have a cool idea, if you search for that plugin, the odds that there's a plugin that does your cool idea is way higher on Magento because there are so many thousands of extensions. Like just the core Magento extension, the market is 5,400 extension. And that's bigger than the Shopify marketplace. And that's just the official one.
Shopify's got over 6,000 now. And
that's just the official one. Okay, they grew a bit. But then you have all the vendors that are not listing on the marketplace, because the marketplace, you need the code review by Adobe and all that. And it's long, and it's slow. So there's a lot of vendors that they want to sell on their site. So you have thousands and thousands of extra plugins that you can just buy directly from vendors.
There's something there. I would say that most of the things that you're going to need to change there's probably an app for that. But I do not, like I'm kind of hinting at, I do not like the one-time fix app that you pay a monthly subscription to and the developers aren't working on that tool anymore. I do not like that in Shopify. Whereas in Magento, it's clearly well accepted and it can fit the business perfectly. It also sounds like in Magento, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but these extensions, I think, they're all changing the back end code, but that's what you're paying for is like, just make these auto adjustments to the code that you've already written and then just injecting it into my site. And then in Shopify, you're more like renting the code, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah,
but Shopify is rented in a lot of ways, semi-rented land because they own it and they can change a lot of the rules. But Magento is true owned property. There's nobody's going to be taking back anything from you there.
I've heard something also about the licensing for Shopify. Maybe you can tell me more. So like on the marketplace, because Shopify and Magento are two of the key players, there are a few other more, of course, out there. Shopify positions themselves, when I'm talking Shopify Plus here versus it's in Magento Commerce versus, Salesforce, BigCommerce, and the other one. So Shopify Plus positions itself a little bit lower than everybody else, sort of as the least expensive option. But I'm told that if you add all the recurring subscription costs for plugins for personalization, especially in the context of a large, more enterprise grade product here, that's with Shopify Plus, that that base license cost difference that is low with Shopify Plus quickly goes up, that there's not much of a license difference afterward.
So we want to separate out the cost of Shopify Plus and the cost of your e-commerce technology stack. So if you're doing 25 million plus a year, you should have a personalization engine. It should probably be a Justuno or a LimeSpot or some big AI-based personalization tool, which I'm sure isn't just like something that you can just build yourself. You need that because they're literally merchandising solutions. They know what products to show at what times and increase conversion rate. And you're going to need a host of other tools on both platforms for a lot of other things. Everyone has their own email service provider separately and all of those things. So the question is, what other tools do you have to buy on Shopify that you wouldn't buy on Magento? And there's not necessarily too much more in the technology costs. For the Shopify Plus itself, I made the calculation a while ago. I have it in like a LinkedIn post, but we found out that if you do, I'm going to get the number wrong, but it was something around 2 million in revenue. Maybe it's a little bit more. You should switch from Shopify to Shopify Plus specifically based on the transaction rate savings that you're going to make. So you go down from 2.9 to 2.4%. And so you can do the math on when 0.5% is less than more than $2,000, you'll save money switching to Plus. That is really almost the only reason to switch to Plus is the savings in your transaction rate. That's almost it. They do give you access to Flow. They give you a dedicated merchant success manager, and you might get some better bandwidth or maybe a couple of other things along those lines. But it really is, I would say, a smooth transitioning upgrade based on transaction volume that you move from Shopify to Shopify Plus. And in some cases, I have seen merchants move down even as their revenue goes up from Plus to Shopify because they ended up using like a third-party vendor for a lot of their payment solutions. That was, again, just a custom thing to them. So that's the main difference there. And absolutely, you're correct that Shopify Plus is still coming in on the low end of the market. There might be like the majority of Plus merchants are doing under 100 million a year, whereas probably the Magento Enterprise are probably much higher than 100 million a year, and they're in the billions. So you definitely see those complex multi-billion-dollar conglomerates being more successful on the Magento platform. Whereas those fast-growing digitally native vertical brands that are famous on social, influencer, and with a very specific like D2C channel as their primary focus, I would say I'd argue see more success on Shopify.
For a small brand, actually, I do recommend them very often if they can and if the product is appropriate to go on Shopify. Like a small mom and pop shop, they call me. They're two-person or they have a bit of personal saving. They want to start like. No, Magento's not made for you. Sorry. I know You've seen a cool template on Template Monster or a Team Forest at $99. You're buying into the wrong platform and product. This is made for the mid-sized market, but it also tailors well with the smaller company, but that are still fairly large. And what I mean by that, and I'll just find the moment, and also the enterprise solution there. So like when you go the licensing costs and all that for Magento, even though there's a tier like starting at 500K a year of volume, it's more made for not for those making 500K, but more for we're at 500K, but like we're venture back with something we're going to explode. Next year we're going to grow. We're going to be in just a few years. We're going to be a mid-sized company in a few years from now. That's more who they're aiming at. So typically Magento is more like at least $1 million and up can be a good fit. I see a better fit in our agency with the 3 million and up kind of client that tends to be good, especially if they have complex needs. Again, because of my previous example, you're a small business, you're just a few employees, but you can have the same problem as a multinational if you have warehouse in multiple countries with currencies and languages and so on. And then Adobe acquired Magento 3 years ago. And since the acquisition of Adobe, Magento is getting pulled even more up market. That's how I feel it's happening. And it's becoming even more enterprise grade and enterprise solution and so on. So if you look at, for example, at the top 1,000 internet merchants online, this is where you can see the stats get totally skewed toward Magento being the market leader there. With there's 121 stores out of it, the top 1,000 that are in Magento, which positions it as the number one platform for that segment of top 1,000. And then you have the other platform listed here. And Shopify is toward the end of the platform list. Like you have a few other in front of this.
If you go at the bottom 1,000 stores, it's all
Shopify is going to win a lot, or it's going to have a hard time maybe with WooCommerce, or I don't know. But I don't have the stats for this. But for sure, Magento's not winning the low end. It is a mid-market solution. So it's part of why you have to be careful. And I was saying, like, not every project is a good fit on both platforms. Majority of projects can have a clear winner as should this be a Shopify project or should this be a Magento project. It's rare that you have a few in the middle. There are some, but still, because you want to be careful to think a bit for the future. And when we're talking total cost of ownership, a replatforming is one of the worst costs you're going to ever have. So if you need a replatform, that could be like $100,000 down the loss or something, or whatever. It depends how much you invest in that platform. When we're talking like mid-sized companies here with complex needs, integration with the ERP system, with the fulfillment system, with the maybe they have OnFleet or Samsara or other fleet management for their truck delivery system integrated with the with the website, the multi-warehouse. It goes quickly up in the build. So then it becomes more like you can get into several hundreds of thousands of dollars of development for those kind of projects, because it's not a website anymore. Maybe the users, he just sees a website. I understand the complexity here, but in the back, it's almost becoming an ERP to some degree, an enterprise resource planning system. It's integrating with the ERP, so it needs to mirror all the power and the complexity of that ERP, so that where, let's say it's SAP that you integrate with Magento here. Well, Magento needs to be able to do all kind of crazy stuff now, so how merchants' returns are handled, how the account creation is handled, and stuff like that. Let's say you're talking about the checkout process. I'm a merchant, complicated business, manufacturers. You look at their product structure and you want to pull your hairs, and you need to do another session to understand how the heck that thing is working. And in their case, they want SAP to do all the calculation for shipping and for the cost for the checkout and for taxes and all that. They don't want the e-commerce store, which is the standard way of doing things, to do those calculations. Normally, you'd have, let's say, a Avalara at your checkout for your US taxes. Maybe you have UPS for your shipping, and then you contact UPS for the shipping. If you have freight, maybe you have FedEx freight or whatever, and you contact that for the shipping cost for your freight stuff. But they didn't want that to all kind of reasons. They need SAP to do those calculations. So during the checkout process, like Magento can hijack the checkout steps and sort of stop there. Let's go to SAP instead for all that shipping pricing and rules and everything. Comes back here, and then the checkout continues. So you got all that power for that large corporation running on SAP that needs an e-commerce store that has the power and flexibility to match SAP.
Yeah, for a store, for a large kind of enterprise provider like that, Shopify is just not an option. It can't even make the short list because you're talking about a lot of needs that and custom integration needs, and so I think that's where we have a cut and dry, clear winner for Magento, and I think we've been hinting at it. There's this gray area on the growth and trajectory of the business where sometimes it's not clear whether you should be building on Magento or on Shopify. And I think what I like to think about is, the advice I would give is you need to build for your 5-year future. I'd love to say, you want to stick with the platform for more than 5 years, but who knows what's going to be held in the business for 5 years. And you have to make sure you can afford to get there, right? You talked about like hundreds of thousands of dollars in maybe launching on Magento, whereas it could be tens of thousands of dollars launching on Shopify. So if you don't have the capital investment, you unfortunately have to underserve yourself slightly to make it to the 5-year future, and then you pay that $150,000 to $200,000 replatforming fee at a later time when the business complexities get there.
Yeah, so, just to interrupt quickly about like budgeting, I've heard a lot of like quotes that are kind of similar in development with Shopify Plus on lots of places, but yes, Magento tends to be just a little higher in general. So like the larger agencies will typically do project either like 100K and up in USD. This is like the general agency. If you get to the largest of all agencies, several hundreds of employees, they'll typically do like 400K and up kind of project. But then you're talking several hundreds of employees or CGI or Accenture, and then they'll get the $500,000 or $1 million project and up. But that's it. It's a different ball game. You will have smaller agencies that will do projects, maybe in the 30, 40, 50K range, but you don't have a 10K Magento project with professional. That doesn't make any sense. It's India outsourcing, you're going to get a disaster.
Yes. Actually, that's, by the way, my first e-commerce business that I launched was Magento One outsourced agency and a big disaster.
Yeah, there you go.
But I don't blame the platform, even though the platform was overwhelming for us, but it was our fault for not being ready or well trained in it. We got pretty close to up to speed, but comparatively, like if you know nothing about your e-commerce platform and you've never used one, maybe you've got a few retail stores and have just completely neglected your website and are now moving online, like it'll be a lot easier for that person to get off the ground on Shopify, even though they are, a $10 million business with most of it being retail, to get their e-commerce up off the ground through Shopify than through Magento. That doesn't mean that it's absolutely the right solution. I just think of that ease of their investment into the transition and even who they might want to hire to help run the D2C and e-commerce side of it, like the actual marketing and acquisition side, not the development side and stuff like that. And I do see projects for Shopify development. I've seen as low as $1,500 for a starting store being built. I'd say most projects, would be $5,000 to $25,000 for a good website build. And then, of course, for larger, more complex stores, higher SKU count, or for migrations, like because we have seen migrations from WooCommerce, from Magento and stuff like that. Then, you could be at 30, 50, and at the absolute upper bound is 100,000. It's kind of, and I think the reason the costs get really up there in Magento, because with Shopify, there's almost no custom APIing. It's always either there's a tool, a widget, an integration. There's very little that needs to be done there. You're gonna actually make those API, if there is any API integrations. It might be between an ERP and a 3PL. And that is actually not typically in the development of a Shopify site, right? Like it's not included in the dev cost because it's kind of a layer outside of the on-site experience. And so it can definitely be a separate thing charged for differently, but you have almost no custom integration work in Shopify. You have a lot of custom development and, making the pages look phenomenal. So it becomes a little bit more about design and then some streamlining technical SEO components and JavaScript rendering and stuff like that. And then importing product catalogs. But it's a lot less on building out custom APIs for sure.
Yeah, that's exactly back to that fundamental thing beyond Shopify and Magento. When you have a SaaS platform, software as a service, and you have that open ecosystem on Magento. So with the SaaS platform, the experience, what you can modify is restricted by templates. It's restricted to some areas. There's limited customization. Like you're saying, checkout is not even allowed to be modified, and some other section or process of how the things work. Well, if they don't even give you access to that specific functionality, then you cannot modify it.
Yeah,
it's not even a question of money.
API. Yeah,
that's it. There's no API endpoint to connect to modify feature, whatever. So it's just impossible to do it. So that's why also those projects for Shopify will tend to cost less to develop because, well, there's less you can do. So they keep you in the sandbox there. And then the Magento project, by definition, tend to be the more complex projects, the larger with the bigger needs and that full customization needs, and then integration with lots of custom API and all that, it becomes huge. So the project can quickly turn into pretty much a software development project and mirroring like functionalities from the ERP and stuff like that, the enterprise resource planning system. So it gets fancy quickly.
So we have our answer. We're settled. I agree completely. I think we're totally on the same page here, which is good to hear.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I think we did a very good cover of it. There's a few more things we didn't talk about it. Let's say like the mobile experience or stuff like that, or you were talking like the speed of loading. Like, if you just install a Magento like this out of the box with a template you buy somewhere like Team Forest or whatever, the speed will suck as well, just like plainly speaking. And you need to spend money for a developer to work on it to do speed optimization. Now, if we get into the more modern stuff, then Adobe has bet pretty hard on what's called PWA, the progressive web app, also called headless synonym. So your front end is pretty much all JavaScript now, and it's generated through API call to Magento API, with the difference that you can create your additional API endpoint in Magento if you have one missing. So there's no limit to customization.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, is Adobe providing the progressive web app option, or
yeah?
Okay, so in Shopify, we have progressive web apps. There's a couple of players in the space, but they are separate SaaS products that you have to buy, and you work with their dev team to ensure success. Some of them are almost plug and play. You just like have a drag and drop builder to make sure that the front end experience is mirroring what you want it to. And then they actually will integrate with the other tools in your Shopify stack to bring in the review widget tool and the loyalty program tool, and there's a few other, maybe on-site chat tool or whatever it is. So they are, the good news is that they do exist. There is dev cost, and it usually is for the upper end merchant. I usually recommend it at about 3 to 5 million in annual revenue is right when a progressive web app becomes viable and scales the business.
I agree. That's the minimum you need for that.
Yeah. And then the only other limitation is because you do have other apps that are showing an on-site experience. So you have to make sure that progressive web app tool can bring in all of those things. And some of them, if they don't have the direct integration, there is actually an opportunity to do custom API development usually in that situation. But then you've got, that's a bloated cost, kind of situation.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it is part of it, the Magento Adobe PDValue Studio. Cool. So it's the future. They're going there. So that's where the whole company is going. It's pretty interesting.
Shopify, I don't think is going to do it. Unfortunately, I think they're letting the partner network create the headless commerce experience, which I find interesting because I think they should. I think they just should have headless commerce built in, but I don't know how technically feasible that is. Because then every developer has certain limitations.
And talking with developers, like I'd like your opinion on this. Let's say, is it easy to find developers or the merchants and so on, because you have that proprietary Liquid technology there for the code? So you need someone who knows Liquid. Like, is that an issue to have a limited pools if you want of Liquid developers?
So I would say there's so many Shopify developers, and because of the size and growth of Shopify, people have flocked to this platform the same way you chose Magento. It kind of has happened to thousands of developers. There's a whole agency network. We're actually about to launch our own agency page. So we've got about 100 agencies that we've vetted that are specific to, they're actually specific to e-commerce. Some are specific to Shopify. And so there's a lot of agencies there, but most importantly, there are these freelance networks. One of them is called, I want to say there's FreeUp, there's StoreTasker, and there's Get Carson. They're all, there's one other that I'm blanking on that I should know. They are it's a pool of vetted Shopify contractors, and then you put your job there, which is I need this page modified, I need the CSS here, I need an SEO overhaul or something like that, and then the individual developer will send you a quote. A lot of times these are actually smaller agencies that are on the platform and then just looking for a small project, right? And it's better than a freelancer, Elancer, or what's the other one, or Fiverr or anything like that, because they are specific to Shopify and they've been vetted and are in the Shopify ecosystem. And that is, so there's another, Upwork was one of them.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, you said Elance, they renamed it to Upwork, so I thought that was covered. Yeah, exactly. So, it's because Adobe typically presents it like that. I have my own sort of independent point of view, but Adobe typically presents it that, since Magento's built on PHP and there's over 5 million PHP developers worldwide, it's the most popular language, or one of the most popular there is for web. And then you have over 350,000 Magento specific developers worldwide, that this is so much bigger, and there's a larger resource pool than
you need more resources to get anything done.
Which is true, which is why I say I have my own independent point of view. There's so much learning curve to Magento that I don't know exactly about the situation with the limited number of Liquid developers on Shopify, but I have a feeling it probably evens out. So in terms of ups and downs,
you need them less often, but the pool is there for you when you require it. And I would say in both cases, Magento, Shopify, and really most other platforms, whatever platform you're on, you should be hiring developers and an agency specific to that platform, because it is really important. You talked about the learning curve for Magento. I can only imagine, the things that because of 15 years of experience, that somebody that knows PHP but not Magento just comes in and like breaks the whole system.
They break their nose. They need to learn. They need to learn. So it's let's say we've done it in the past. I heard to see a PHP programmer with 15 years of experience, certified as a Zambia PHP engineer, blah blah blah. He needs at least 1 year of full-time work to go get his first grade junior certification, which is now called Adobe Certified Professional Magento Developer. So it's at least a 1 year learning curve for a backend developer to just like get up to par, so to speak, to just be competent on the platform. Let's call it this way.
That's interesting. I don't know if Shopify has the same bar or not. They do have some certified partner programs and a few other things and resources, but I do know that the platforms I mentioned with the pools of contractors, they have their own kind of onboarding and vetting process, and they do deny a large portion of applying developers that just don't seem to have the amount of hours put into the platform to be successful yet.
Yeah. So, well, that's the standard Adobe way. So like it was changed. It used to be different with when it was the Magento days. So now Adobe does that for all their platforms, not just Magento. So you have the first grade, it's like professional developer. Second one's expert, certified developer, expert this, expert that. And then the third degree is the master, which can be like a master architect, master full stack certified, and so on. So you have that gradation there. But the guy needs at least 1 year full-time experience to get possibly be realistic to pass the first level of certification. So I think that covers well for developers. Like we didn't talk much about AI or what's happening in there for Shopify. I just don't know what's happening for Shopify with AI. I can tell you what's going on with Magento, but go ahead. Tell me about Shopify. I want to know something.
I don't know nothing. I don't think there's anything. There might be some things going on in the background of how they're managing server loads and a few other things like that. But any AI solution that you would want to use is going to be an app partner to Shopify. So whether it's a recommendation tool, like a personalization recommendation tool, dynamically changing web pages based on content, or there's a price testing tool out there that uses AI to predict the best price of your products. And there's AI copywriting tools and all these things. We actually just did an event last week called the Future of E-commerce AI, and how it's changing the industry. And Shopify didn't speak, and and Shopify certainly knows that these tools are out there, but they focus on the platform dynamics, which don't really require any machine learning or artificial intelligence, save for, like I said, some server load time and maybe a few other. I'm trying to think of what it could be. Sales. No, yeah, there's not too much that they need to do in terms of building AI. But this is what I want to hear from Magento and what are they building, and that is so great here.
Yeah, so in that case, we likely have a win on the Magento side for the AI because of the following reason. Yes, they Adobe themselves, they charge of AI with the Adobe Sensei platform, which is the Adobe AI platform that they are integrating across all their products, not just Magento. And why I believe that's Magento win then is because how deep do you integrate your AI to capture data from your visitors to do the best recommendation or the best understanding of the person who's shopping there? You need to go deep with this because let's say on Magento, there are some third-party plugin providers to add AI in the form of Amazon Personalized. So Amazon has that, Amazon product recommendation engine. You can just pay per request and have access to it. And Amazon will generate recommendation for your catalog through Amazon Personalized. So that can be integrated with a store like Magento and other types of stores as well. But the plugin maker, or the extension maker who integrated that Amazon Personalized with Magento, their touch point and data collection points are far more limited than what is built by Adobe. Like Adobe then has more of that big brother approach that everything on the website is tracks and feeds data to the AI to try to understand who's in front of me now. So even the page builder, the drag and drop page builder supports it. Everything supports it. So the main areas in which you can see artificial intelligence on Adobe, it's strictly on the Adobe Commerce version, regardless if it's cloud or on-premise, not on the Magento open source section. And then you will have product recommendation that is made through AI. And what's really powerful about this, well, in this case, more data from visitors to give better recommendation. But by using AI in general for product recommendation, let's say you have a fairly large catalog, not large at all, but let's say 40,000 SKUs. Okay, that's quite a sizable catalog. You know, now if you want to suggest other products to buy, you could do it in a more manual way that somebody fills a spreadsheet and says, that's insane for 40,000 products. Yeah. I agree. Then there are one better before AI is other tools like automated rules. If you're in this section, show also this. If you're looking at cameras, show bags and batteries and accessories, that kind of thing.
I think that should be dead as well.
I agree. Then the next one after that better is based on some data, like a beginning. It's not AI, but just like something smart, like people who bought also bought, people who viewed also viewed, and it's based on real checkout data. And this has the downside that you need enough data of people who have viewed the product out of your 40,000 SKUs for this to have any data to feed. And it will not be a personalized experience because everybody will see the same recommendation that people who viewed also viewed. And here's the 3 other that they viewed, you know? And this is almost like if you go to Netflix or Amazon Prime Video or whatever, and everybody would get the same recommendation. Doesn't make much sense to me in terms of personalized user experience.
Yeah.
And that's where AI comes in and just like trumps everything, because then on that whole catalog of 40,000 SKUs, you will have personalized recommendation based on who the AI thinks you are as a persona, based also cross-match with what sold in the past related to this and so on, what might interest you. And then the kicker is that the AI will self-correct. So across the full catalog of 40,000 products, if something does not convert, doesn't add to cart, doesn't check out, it's going to start suggesting something else. So it auto-corrects everywhere based on performance. And that just becomes incredibly powerful. So that's for like product recommendation through AI for large catalogs.
So I love that Adobe has that, let's say, separate AI product. And I would imagine you end up integrating this into most of your builds for your merchants. Similarly, anybody, I would say, even they actually, a lot of these tools are now scalable all the way down to starting stores. So I'm assuming Adobe Sensei is more than, more than $100 a month, right? So
it just comes with the license, the same fee. It's included in the license.
It's free for all Magento plans.
All Magento Commerce.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's huge. So now I can't necessarily compete on price, but there are personalization tools. I mentioned 2, I think already. LimeSpot and Just Uno are 2 of the big ones in the space. Perfectly integrate with Shopify so that you get all the data you need to make the right recommendations, and both are very good. Just fully robust solutions, conversion platforms, and merchandising platforms that understand, is this in stock? Stop showing products that are out of stock. Right. All of those things. But also, I know with LimeSpot specifically, it uses data points not just across your website, but across their users on all platforms, which is in a GDPR compliant way. They're able to say, oh, well, this person was visiting on another product intended to lean towards products that were female oriented. So I'm assuming they're still a female. So we'll show them female oriented products on our site, right? So there's like just a basic kind of learnings that you can carry over across site that make their platform really powerful, and you can see the boost in conversion rate.
Yeah, I believe that it can self-pay if you have a large enough traffic base and catalog and complexity and so on. And there's 2 more really cool things about that AI. Like another one is visually similar products through visual recognition of image and patterns through AI. So that's really cool. If you're familiar, let's say with the website Adobe Stock, not everybody knows, but you can search by picture. So next to the search is a little icon, upload a picture. You put a picture in there, and then Adobe Stock will search for other similar picture based on that image search from AI. So you have the same functionality in Magento because it's using the same thing. It's Adobe Sensei. And then you can have a search visually similar, and then it will show you garments or whatever that are visually similar. So that's quite powerful.
So believe it or not, it's not as powerful as you think, image search in that regard, in the sense of, let's say I have 40,000 SKUs. Now, most of the time, these SKUs, wherever they're coming from, vendors or something like that, are going to have tags or something associated with them, like meta description information that give us more about that product. And if you're not getting that information from the vendor and you need to create it, then yeah, using a tool that analyzes the image and creates a handful of tags for it can be really helpful. But usually, you know that it's a red dress, a slim size, with a bow. Usually, you know those four things or whatever. So you don't actually need the machine learning to find.
That depends where. So for simple example, I'll agree with you. Then you get to more fancy, more complex thing. Let's say you have whatever it is, shoes. Try on a Nike sneaker or an Adidas or whatever to say what colors the goddamn shoe. It has so many colors on it, and the patterns are different, and the swirl and the this and the that. And nothing is really gray. It's night gray, it's light gray, it's day gray, it's whatever.
When we're recommending another product, you can get close just on basic functionality, show the recommendations, and then the engine finds out which products people are clicking on and makes the correlation over time. So you're only saving a little bit of time by having that additional data at best.
What I suggest with this is actually to do what you just said to do, but to add an additional row of visually similar so that you separate the visually similar thing with what you just said. So you keep all the benefits of what you just said, and you add the benefit of visually similar. And this is really cool in so many instances because you have all that very advanced capability because they want to use this for software like Photoshop, for photo touch-ups and retouching and so on. So the software is smart enough that, let's say, this picture was a fancy picture of a woman wearing a dress, but she's on an orange background, not a white background, not typical. Well, the software is smart enough to know that the orange is not part of the garment. Okay. Yeah. And this is not a white and orange dress. This is just a white dress. And it will suggest you stuff like that. And same thing for the patterns that are on it. It can recognize the type of drawings, shapes and angles or swirls or whatever, or flowery and whatever. And it will suggest patterns that match. Same thing for, let's say, tiles. You have a lot of subtleties and marble tiles and whatever and stuff like that. And then you can see visually similar, all just showing up like that on that extra recommendation row, which is quite interesting.
I like that. I like the idea of having a second recommendation row for visually similar, because the first one could be, products that this type of person is most likely to buy. The second one is products that are more like this product, but slightly different. And there's kind of two mindsets inside of, I think, the consumer's mind at the same time, which is like, I'm shopping. I want to see things that I like, but look, I'm on this product. I want to see things that are like this product for now. And so, and giving them the choice between those two options, I think, is valuable. But now we've gone completely off topic.
Well, yes and no. We went into AI, which is not covered by Shopify directly. Let's see, just to wrap AI, because it's such a fun topic. They just added now, early 2021, the AI search as well for Magento Commerce. So that was not there before. We had Elasticsearch, very powerful for search like for millions of items in a few milliseconds. But now you have AI search. So that's the latest thing. It's so new, I cannot tell you much about it.
Great, powerful, love it. And I love that it's in-house. And again, with Shopify, there's going to be an app, you're going to pay a monthly fee. And the good news about it is that these app providers are phenomenal. They're competing with each other. They're building new products and features. It's a relatively mature market of competitors there. So the pro of Magento here might be that you've got Adobe backing it, and it's probably a very good search functionality. But it's probably the only on-site search functionality you can use. So if it doesn't have a bell or whistle you like, I mean, you probably can custom install.
Careful, Magento customization.
Yeah, okay.
You can replace it with whatever.
But you kind of want it to be from Adobe, I would argue. Whereas Shopify said, we're not even going to touch that category. We want the market to compete for the best on-site search personalization, the same way they let them compete for the best email service provider. And they let the best pop-up tool and so forth and so on. They didn't want to take those spaces so that they could focus on the core of the platform and let those markets, they win regardless of, they win if those markets grow and get better, essentially. So,
yeah. All right. I guess we covered pretty well the topic. Is there anything we forgot to discuss about Magento versus Shopify?
I think, it's been quite a lot. And, At the end of the day, there's a reason both of these are clear competitors in this large open space, because they have different, focuses and are good for different things. And so they are, fairly well differentiated with that one layer of overlap is the, growing 10 to $25 million merchant could really go either way. And I think that as far as you and I have contention, I'll be pulling them to Shopify probably still, and you'll be pulling them to Magento at those stages. But again, it will come down to complexities for sure. Because
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So the simpler the site, the simpler the business case. You have 3-color T-shirt, 3 sizes, and you just add to cart checkout. Nothing fancy. Go Shopify is going to cost less, basically. For a very small merchant, go Shopify. Magento's built for the mid-size market and is expanding more and more to the enterprise territory very strongly, with Adobe having such a strong worldwide presence in enterprise-grade software. And it's made for complex need, multi-warehouse, multi-brands, multi-inventory, complex catalogs, large catalogs, the complex products here, the multilingual and all that stuff. That's when, really Magento shines more and more. The more complex the project becomes, the more large scales it becomes in terms of complexity and implementation.
If I could make one recommendation to merchants, it is to not overly complicate your business.
I agree. I'll back you 100% on this. Like, if you can simplify, if it's okay to use the standard thing that, say, the Shopify offers, well, it might be a good decision. But some businesses just cannot do it. Maybe their franchise approach, or they have a lot of brands and stores and they need it to work that specific way. Well, then that's when they need to go in Magento way. Like, complexity, I don't see it as a benefit. Complexity is a negative. You want to reduce complexity, but sometimes those businesses have a lot of complexity, and then they need a platform that can handle that complexity, and it becomes Magento. But it costs more also, both to build it initially and to upkeep it later. So, it's sort of like,
and that's why I see older, larger brands do lean towards Magento, whereas younger, newer brands, they're simpler by nature, but probably looking to keep simplicity a little bit more by the nature of them. And by the way, the rise of those brands has only really begun because of the proliferation and opportunity that an easy to use platform exists. Meaning, if you couldn't use the cheap platform, then you would never would have gotten the company off the ground in a non-complicated way. So one kind of begot the other, and now you see slim, just more streamlined business models and existing and thriving on Shopify that couldn't have existed in the year 2000 or even 2010.
Awesome. I think we covered everything here.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you for being here today, Derric. It was great recording. I enjoyed the session together. Talk about Shopify versus Magento as objectively as possible, despite us being each, you're a Shopify expert and a Magento expert. But I think we did a pretty good job. Try to be objective here with the comparison.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.